We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world. We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Punisher Soviet, Issue 1. This miniseries is from 2019 from Marvel Comics, written by Garth Ennis, pencils by Jason Burrows, Guillermo Ortega did the inks, Nolan Woodard did the colors, Rob Stein lettering, Paulo Rivera did the cover. I do like the cover, it's kind of cool. It doesn't really say anything, it's more of a pin-up, but it's pretty cool. Assistant editor was Kathleen Wazinski, Nick Lowe editor. So Frank gets some dirt on this mob situation. Several mobs are being hit, and it turns out one's been getting hit for a few years now, and strangely, Frank had nothing to do with it. These guys have been getting hit for 5 years, and they think it's the Punisher, but it's somebody else. Somebody good, too. They are really, really good with an AK in tight quarters. Not making too much of a mess, but hitting all the right bad guys. Minimal civilian influence. Fantastic work. Frank has to blow some bad guys up to find a lot of this out. This issue really is set up, but it's fun. It's back to Punisher form. If you like Frank being a violent killer who goes after really scummy people, this is the book for you. It's good to see Garth Ennis back on Punisher. I wish he was doing the regular Punisher book. He would make it a little bit more masculine, let's say. So if you're looking for a good old-fashioned Frank Castle adventure, this is it. I thought it was a lot of fun. I'm excited to read issue 2. It's great to see the Punisher back to form, and the art is solid in this. Frank's jaw looks a little more chiseled. He looks a little bit more like a movie actor than Frank Castle, so I don't know what's going on with his jawline, but otherwise, the art's pretty solid. So overall, the story was good, the art's good, cover's catchy. I don't feel cheated for my money, even though the paper quality is complete garbage on this book. I had a blast reading this, and it's regular price, $3.99. So I was actually not overly upset about paying that for it to see Garth Ennis back on Punisher. I would like it to be cheaper because the paper quality is total trash and it's going to get destroyed really easily. The paper is really cheap, but at least the ink didn't come off on my fingers. So I'm going to recommend this despite the poor quality of the paper because I really like the creative team on it and I liked the story quite a bit. This is a very mature title. There's a lot of swearing, but don't let that stop you from checking it out. This one's worth a look. So if you get a chance to pick it up, definitely check it out. It's a good Punisher story so far. Hopefully it will continue to be, but that's just my opinion on it. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Punisher Soviet Issue 2. This is a miniseries from Marvel Comics from 2019, written by Garth Ennis, pencils by Jason Burrows, inks by Guillermo Ortega, Nolan Woodard did the colors, Rob Stein letters, cover by Paulo Rivera. It's okay, it doesn't really do anything for me. It looks like an old Soviet poster, which I think is what they're going for. It's just okay. Assistant editor was Kathleen Wazinski, editor Nick Lowe. So Frank finally comes face to face with the man who is committing the crimes that he's being accused of by the Russians. But this guy's got a personal vendetta against this particular Russian mob and the head of it. And him and Frank make nice pretty quick as they try and escape from the cops. But they're getting paid off. So there's a hit team on their case and they have to have a little team up. We also learn about why this guy is hunting Pachenko and his Russian mob. And that it involves something that happened when the Russians were in Afghanistan back during the old Soviet era of like 86. All in all, this was a kind of background issue where we have the two protagonists kind of starting their team up and we learn a lot about this guy whose name I can't pronounce, so I'm not gonna butcher it. But overall, the story is not bad. The art needs a little bit of work. Frank's jaw looks really weird a lot of times. Otherwise, it's really good. Just Frank's face looks kind of odd. Sometimes people's mouths look a little weird. Some of the color choices I found found very odd. Like the heavy use of pinks during the firefight, I thought that was kind of dumb. They're using a lot of purples and pinks and pastels in Marvel now, and I don't know why, because it really kind of contrasts and doesn't really bring the picture together very well, and I find it kind of lazy and boring. It just makes it look weird. But overall, this was an interesting issue. It had some action, and there is a lot of talking, but it's all background information and plot development, so I didn't mind it. I think this will be overall better as a trade paperback to read than as a single issue miniseries. If you do these individually, they're probably not going to have as much impact as if you picked it up as a trade paperback or a graphic novel. That's just my impression so far. It's a good issue. Is it worth $4 though? I don't know. It really depends on if you're expecting an action book or if you're expecting a plot-driven story. If you're expecting a plot-driven story, yeah, you'll probably think it's worth it. But if you're expecting an action book, the action that's in here is almost secondary to what the dialogue and captions are telling you. So don't go in expecting an action book. I thought Garth Ennis did a great job with the story, but I do like a lot of his work on the Punisher. And like I said, the art's pretty good except for Frank's jawline looks really abnormal. They need to get away from him being a Vietnam vet too. They're gonna have to age him up because he would be like in his late 70s at this point otherwise, and it really doesn't fit. You're gonna have to bump him up to like a Gulf War veteran. So they kind of need to think about that. Paper quality is garbage too, so be aware of that. So again, this is looking more and more like something I would pick up in trade as opposed to single issues, just because of the way the narrative is structured and the garbage paper quality. But I will still recommend it. I thought it was a fun story, but I don't really think it's worth the cover price because of the garbage paper and some of the plot being probably not appealing to the majority of crowds. It's an underserved book for sure. I think it's got a lot of potential. It's probably not going to be for everyone and probably should have been released as a graphic. But that's just my take. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the review, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Punisher Soviet Issue 3. This is written by Garth Ennis, pencils by Jason Burrows, inks by Guillermo Ortego, Nolan Woodard did the colors, Rob Steen lettering, cover by Paulo Rivera, assistant editor Kathleen Wazinski, Nick Lowe editor. This cover is actually probably the best one I've seen so far. I think it actually isn't bad, and it does kind of relate to what's going on in the story. Now, we pick up with what we left off with last time, which is flashback story. This is from Frank's new quasi friend Stepankovich, I think it's how it's pronounced, and what happened to him back in Afghanistan and the horrors he saw there. The story is mostly told by him with very little of Frank in the book, but it's a real interesting war story and it's very horrific. There's not a lot I can say except that this guy's tour in Afghanistan led to him seeing some incredibly horrible events that mainly revolved around his friends being killed by the Mujahideen. And back then, during the 80s, the US, through the CIA, was giving arms and equipment to the Afghanis to fight the Russians. Sort of a secret proxy war. And this guy ended up on the losing end of an attack by a lot of the Afghan soldiers. And while he watched his friends get butchered in some pretty graphic and horrific ways, he survived to tell the tale, but he was gravely injured in the process, and we see a lot of that and what resulted. And then there's an amazing weird twist ending that leads into the next issue. So this issue is almost entirely flashback, and since Frank is barely in it, it's going to probably turn a lot of people off. But it is a really well done story. It's very interesting. I can kind of see a lot of the way this guy is talking is actually the way Garth Ennis probably talks. I think he's Irish, somewhere either in the UK or Ireland, and it really shows in some of the way the dialogue is written. That's the only real detraction I had, was 2 or 3 instances of that. It's clearly an English speaker translating and using dialect or idioms that would be more English than it would be Russian. Otherwise, it's a really good story. It's really well written. It's a solid book. It's just not entirely a Punisher book. So if you pick this book up, you're seeing a Russian guy's story, and he's sort of a Russian version of the Punisher. So you're seeing more of that than you are of Frank Castle in this issue, and it's definitely going to turn people off. I think this would have made a better graphic novel than a miniseries. It was probably a mistake to release it as a miniseries, especially considering the sales are so bad, but it's still a really well told story, and it is really interesting, and I'm looking forward to the next issue. So I will recommend this, but so far this looks more and more like you should pick it up as a trade than as a miniseries, because it's not exactly a Punisher story, and I think that's very misleading, because Frank so far is really not that major of a player in the last 2 issues. So while I did like it, it's not your typical Frank Castle story. It is really well done though. If you like Garth Ennis's work, this is probably going to be for you. If you like his Punisher work, you'll probably know what to expect, but again, so far Frank is not the major player in this story. So it was a little misleading, but it is still an interesting story with this kind of Russian Punisher character. So I'm intrigued to see where it goes, so I will recommend it, but again, probably be better served as a trade paperback or grabbing it out of the discount bin. But we'll see how it plays out next issue. In the meantime, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Punisher Soviet issue 4. This is a 6-part miniseries from Marvel Comics, written by Garth Ennis, pencils by Jason Burrows, inks by Guillermo Ortega. Nolan Woodard was the colorist, Rob Steen lettering, Pablo Rivera did the cover. This cover is probably the best one of the group so far. Associate editor Kathleen Wazinski, Nick Lowe editor. Alright, so we kind of jump ahead from where we left off last issue. Last issue was kind of wrapping up this guy's origin, this valet, I think his name is pronounced. Pretty interesting story. I wasn't really sure how it was going to tie in, but we found out a lot about Prochenko, and now Frank and this guy Valet are trying to effectively get some information and maybe a little bit of a bargaining chip, and they take somebody near and dear to Prochenko's life. We learn a lot about her, and that's when things go pretty horribly wrong, and some bad guys show up, and we have a bit of a cliffhanger ending. Doesn't really feel like a cliffhanger per se, more of the end of a chapter. So we're gonna see where it goes next issue, but overall, this was actually a pretty decent issue. It does feel like a serialized story, but this really feels like a graphic novel that got cut up into a mini-series, because some of the endings are a little awkward, and the transitions don't make a lot of sense as single issues. So more and more I'm leaning toward buy this in trade if you're interested in it, but I think it's pretty well done as far as the story goes. The art is getting a little bit better, except Frank's jaw looks really terrible, and the background in the cabin that they're in doesn't look like it fits. The color contrast is too sharp between the characters and the background itself, so it actually looks like a photograph of some kind that was either traced or the background was changed to look less like a photograph, even though it is a photograph. I don't think it is. I think it's a traced Google image of some kind, but the color contrast just doesn't work for me on that one, and that's a lot of the issue, is seeing the interior of this cabin, because there's a lot of flashbacks and talking. So overall, the art's passable. It's not my favorite, but I think it is getting a little bit better over the course of the series. So we'll see how it goes next time. The colorist did a great job. I think the colors really were wonderful on the explosions. It's just the background picture of the cabin doesn't seem to fit, and I don't know if that's because of the artist or the colorist, but otherwise the colorist did a great job. The artist, I think, is getting a little better, but needs to work on facial proportions. Overall, though, I'd recommend it, but I'm leaning more and more toward the trade paperback or getting it out of the discount bin. So we'll see how issue 5 plays out, but right now this is a recommendation, but only if you can find it for less than $4. Paper quality is not that good to begin with, and the fact that it feels like it's chopped up from a graphic novel really hurts it in the long run. So it's not worth $4, but it is good. But that's just my take. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at Punisher Soviet issue 5. This is from the 2019 miniseries from Marvel Comics, written by Garth Ennis, pencils by Jason Burrows, inks by Guillermo Otego, Nolan Woodard did the colors, Rob Steen lettering, Pablo Rivera did the cover. This cover's okay. It does kind of play into what's going on in the story. Doesn't really do it for me though. It seems kind of boring. The multi-tone red, black, white does work, but it didn't really work for me. Associate editor Kathleen Wazinski, Nick Lowe editor. So we pick up where we left off with Punisher and Valerie trying to figure out what their next move is, and they've got Perchenko's wife. Well, she manages to remove herself from this little game. Unfortunately, that means those two guys are going to be hunted by some hired thugs, and Perchenko's sons get involved, and things go pretty crazy pretty quick. So there's a tracking device on this woman we learned last issue, and the bad guys are going to try and use that to their advantage, but Frank has other plans, of course, because he's Frank Castle. Now, things get pretty wild pretty quick, and there is a lot of gunplay at the end, and the ending was actually something I didn't see coming. There is a bit of a twist ending, and it works really well in the story. The art does seem to have improved a little bit. Frank's jaw is not so freakishly weird anymore, and I'm starting to see some influences from Dylan, one of the artists that used to work with Garth Ennis on Punisher back in the day, and I think the artist has potential to get there, but needs to work a little harder on body proportions and facial structure. But beyond that, the style is not going to appeal to everyone, but I'm used to Dylan's work, so it's not too bad. But he's definitely getting better over the course of this miniseries, and the last few pages of this one really does bring that out. So really good job to the artist for improving, but not quite there yet. You got to work on mouths, arm proportions and length, and Frank Castle's jawline doesn't need to make him look like Robert Zadar. But the storyline is pretty solid. I'm enjoying that quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to reading the final issue. I really wish the regular Punisher series, if it ever comes back, would be more masculine like this is. It's definitely a lot more testosterone driven with gunplay and killing bad guys like the Punisher really should be. Maybe not as over the top as some of Garth Ennis' previous work on Punisher, but it should definitely be a lot more adventurous and action movie type violence. I thought this miniseries has been pretty fun, so this is a definite recommend. I think it will be better as a trade paperback though, tracking down the individual issues. They're not going to make a lot of sense without the first two issues, I think, and it's really a much better told story as one complete piece rather than farming it out in little segments like this. So I would definitely say get this as a trade, but we'll see how it wraps up before I go all in on that. But that's just my take. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at Punisher Soviet issue 6. This is the final issue in the miniseries, written by Garth Ennis, pencils by Jason Burrows, inks by Guillermo Ortego, colors by Nolan Woodard, lettering by Rob Steen, cover by Pablo Rivera. This cover's okay. It doesn't really tell you anything, but it's okay. Associate editor Kathleen Wazinski, editor Nick Lowe. So Frank's stuck with a dilemma. Does he honor the wishes of his associate, or does he do things his way? Well, it's Frank Castle, so he's doing them mostly his way. And now he's also got these 3 hostages, and he has to make a decision as to what to do with them. And that's a pretty easy decision for Frank. So Frank then goes to meet with this corrupt senator and Perchenko, only they don't know he's coming. And when he shows up, oh boy, does he make things dark. Really, really dark. And the series wraps up pretty much like you would expect. It's got a little epilogue on it, and it's really well done. I thought the story was pretty solid. The art definitely improved over the miniseries, and there's some really cool scenes in here where the coloring really pops out. And one of them is there's this great shot of a bullet casing popping up and this like orange color and shading on Frank's face. That scene worked really well. There were some other panels like that that were really, really good. I thought the colorist did a really spectacular job in this issue overall. Some of the tones were a little muted, but I think it was supposed to look that way. Otherwise, otherwise, the pencils got better and the inker did a fine job, but the penciler did a definitely better job by issue 6 than he did in issue 1, especially with Frank's jawline did improve. Not quite there yet, but it was definite improvement. So I would say this miniseries is definitely worth checking out, but get it in trade paperback if you can. I think it makes more sense as a complete story if you sit down and read it front to back instead of piecing it out in the floppies like I did. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work that well because issues 2 and 3 really don't feel like they have a lot to do with the story, but they are referenced later on. So if you read the individual issues, you might get a little bored because you don't think it's going to relate, but it kind of does, and it makes sense later with why Frank does what he does at the end of the series. So I would say stick with it if you're getting these as single issues, but I would definitely recommend getting them as a trade instead. So pretty solid miniseries. I'm actually impressed with it. I thought it was a pretty fun ride. But that's just my take. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you want to help the channel in other ways, links are in the description and on the About page. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.